So I think we're all recording.
All right.
I'm
Let's
recording.
get cracking with the
Can you hear
napkin.
me now? Yes, it does.
Some interest in learning a bit more about technology, philosophy, and I like to.
I'm an educator.
Absolutely. We're gonna stay anonymous.
That's a cop out.
The binary's gone. I thought Jingo was plus Dutch for cheers.
Yeah, when you're ready.
Right. Welcome to Beyond Binary Thinking. If we can't change your mind, you're probably not using it.
Thanks everyone for listening to two of our most popular episodes recently on the environment and Brexit. The feedback about Toby was really positive, so we brought him into the mix. I was criticised for not defending Brexit a bit harder, but to be honest, the intention of this podcast is to have an honest and nuanced, reasonable discussion, and I couldn't really do that while staunchly defending Brexit much harder. So, sorry, those were the best arguments I had.
Yeah, there was also some backlash from the Enviropocalypse episode, with people saying that we didn't listen to the climate change skeptics. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
You don't have to listen to this climate change skeptics.
My thoughts exactly, right? Like, for me, I put them in the basket of flat earthers and anti-vaxxers. If you're flying in the face of that much scientific consensus, then I think the onus is on you to provide evidence for your crazy conspiracy theories. So, yeah, moving on.
And with that in mind, let's discuss why neoliberalism is the boogeyman that's ruining the planet.
Yeah, I think the environment was an interesting one because being part of the Extinction Rebellion protests, I saw the massive disconnect between what I saw on the ground and how the media was portraying it, right? So every day we were there, every time there was an ambulance, people couldn't have moved off the road quicker, right? But yeah, that was never how the news was going to report it. And the dichotomies they throw up, like, they can't win, right? Either it's a bunch of middle-aged hippies who they're rich and they don't need to work, or they're like scum of the earth on the dole and they wouldn't have jobs anyway and they should get jobs. Either they were a depressing death cult or they're having too much fun, they're just dancing and raving. So.
And so now, like, the most enduring image is the guys being pulled off the trains and a bunch of people like gleefully pointing the finger like, aha, you're stopping the workers from accessing public transport, you are terrible. And it's like, that's not all that happened.
So this was an interesting one because, especially being part of the groups, I saw that whole thing happen in slow motion, and two people announced they were going to do it. Every single other person in the groups were like, please don't do that, that's a bad idea. But the whole premise of Extinction Rebellion is that it's like decentralized, so if someone's going to do it, you can't really stop them. They want to be like, autonomous groups. So all they did in the end was write a strongly worded email being like, so here's why we recommend you don't do it. And they went ahead and did it, and exactly what you thought would happen happened. And it was in Canning Town, where a bunch of angry people who are stressed and pissed off and having to fight to go to a job they don't want anyway. The predictable happened, and then the news covered nothing but that for 7 days. It's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like conspiracy theories, do you think that this was just heat of the moment, some badly thought out idea, or could it have been agent saboteurs wanting like explicitly to kind of like, do we know anything about the people who did this?
They were retired priests, as far as I can tell, not your typical agent saboteur candidates, I think. Stephen, we should introduce you before we natter on too much. How are you? Thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm well. Thanks for having me on. This is the first official podcast I've done, I believe.
Superb. Well, this is the first YouTuber we've spoken to, so
okay.
First for everything.
I wasn't aware of your videos until Chris introduced me, and I've just been binge watching them. They're brilliant.
Thank you. Really?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I have some fans.
Yeah, no, it's that's soothing Canadian accent. You're pretty much on point when it comes to Marxism. It seems like we like the same YouTubers as well, so no, it's all really good.
We like the same YouTubers, is that what you said?
Yeah. I think
Zero Books.
Yeah, Zero Books. Obviously, ContraPoints, which it's like you have a bit of a crush on her, which is fair enough. So do I. But you mentioned quite recently how you were you saw yourself as part of dirtbag left.
What I love with brochureless and dirtbag leftists is I can tell that they've been made by their detractors, that term.
Yeah.
But they've instantly embraced it and been like, you think
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
offended by that
Yeah,
shit?
I love the word brochureless. My channel was almost called something brochureless.
The brochureless, yeah.
The way they try to describe brochureless is that they're all misogynists or whatever, but yeah, it's a made up thing. It doesn't exist.
No, but when I heard it, I was like, where do I join? I want to be a bro.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's often the case, right? These terms that are meant to upset you, you're like, no, that sounds awesome. It's like those, you ever had a shitty housemate who's like stopped talking to you as a punishment?
Yep.
Actually, it's a fucking reward. You're like, oh, this is amazing.
That's great. I have. I think to me, when people say, when I hear dirtbag left, to me that just means a normie who is also a leftist. Because when I got into the online left spaces and particularly BreadTube, it really is very much like a little kindergarten for the island of misfit toys. Like it's all people who are don't go out in public. They don't have a lot of friends. Trans. They're non-binary. They have they're disabled. Nothing wrong with any of those things. They're just very I don't know, like they're not the kind of people that you'd expect you'd see at a sports bar or at a house party. And I was always the guy that was at the house parties or the sports bars. In that environment, you hear a lot of slurs and dirty jokes and shit like that, but no one takes them seriously, or at least most people don't. So like, yeah, I used to say retard all the time. I say it much less now, almost never. And I guess that's how kind of most people think of dirtbag leftists.
Yeah. I can kind of emphasize with that as well. Like I have very strong leftist views, but I've never felt the need to like police my language. Okay.
We grew up on that like South Park liberalism.
Yes.
Right? Like, so it's fine, but don't take yourself too seriously. Yeah. And anyone that's, there's sort of like Hitch, Stephen Fry, sort of anyone that's taking offense and trying to shut down conversation, it doesn't give them the right to an opinion. Right? Like,
you just said those are all my my non. Well, I mean, Hitch was a socialist, but those are basically all my non leftist influences. South Park. Christopher Hitchens especially, loved him. I'm coming out of a Sam Harris phase currently.
Well, this is it. So Hitch, bless him, made the blueprint for all these people who are like, say they're very liberal, but really spend a lot more time defending the status quo, the American imperial war machine.
Right, and that's true. He did do that, but when pressed, like every once in a while, you can find an interview with him or a talk that's on a particular subject. I think he went on to talk about Trotsky and one or two, like I think in the late 2000s, and like you'd never know that he was a war hawk listening to him, because his old Trotskyism comes out.
Whereas like Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, there's this bunch of people who claim that they're left, but you just never see evidence of it.
Well, Peterson never claimed he was left.
Oh, he does sometimes actually in interviews when he's pushed. He's like, oh, actually, if you looked at my politics, like I would be considered left on many things, and you're like,
compared to who?
Which one? The people he hangs out with.
Yeah.
Well,
Fair.
well, a recurring theme amongst fascists is, of course, that they have no actual beliefs and that they're grifters who will blow whichever way the wind blows. But yeah, there we are.
Yes.
Not calling, of course, Peterson a fascist, but anyways. So this episode, I mean, we're exploring the ways in which the left is fighting itself and what steps can be taken to actually win an election without selling out to the center. And I think that this is very important now that we have two big things happening sort of in the West with the US election 2020 and the Omni cluster that is Brexit and UK politics. I know that there's been a recent election in Canada as well, yeah?
Yes. And to be honest, like I have been far more excited about American politics and British politics than I have about Canadian or Australian politics, because Canada there is no equivalent Bernie Sanders or AOC or really anyone on the actual left, whereas I feel like some of Corbyn's team and Bernie Sanders in particular offer some possibilities for some real change in the future.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, if they can, right? If they're allowed
Yes.
to.
If yeah, exactly, if they're allowed to win, and that's like, why isn't there more support behind these people? Why isn't Bernie the front runner? Why is Joe Biden?
Well, so because when Bernie is the front runner, the news doesn't report on that. They report on who's coming third, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing to
Yeah,
watch.
it's actually a joke. Like the alt right loves saying clown world, and they're right, but in the wrong way. Like it is clown world.
Yeah.
How the corporate media is spinning it and trying to make Bernie look as bad as possible. Have you guys seen? There's a video in particular called "Rising Up." Bernie Sanders. You almost tear up watching it every single time. It's incredible because it shows the contrast of the way the corporate media, CNN, MSNBC, the supposedly liberal outlets treat him, and the things they say about him, being curmudgeonly and an old crank and never smiles, all this stuff. And it contrasts that with like actual footage of the reality and how people love the man and react to him.
And he discussed that beautifully on the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Like he's like, look, if you have a 5-minute interview and they then take a 10-second soundbite out of it, it's never going to work when you're trying to discuss economic change.
And they're
right?
they're terrified of it.
I mean, that actually reminds me of something Marianne Williamson, who's
Yes.
obviously portrayed as the kooky one, and no, she
She is kooky.
yeah. She there's some problems with her as a candidate, even though like, on surface level, love rather than hate is a nice platform. However, she was having an interview with is it Rubin?
Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin.
No, the guy that takes the intellectual out of the intellectual.
We shouldn't bully him for his mental retardation, but bless him. However, right at the end of the interview, there's the Surfs did a beautiful supercut of him basically as being owned. Right at the end, he's like, "Oh wow, you weren't anything like what I expected you to be," and she just snaps back while the media is pretty much responsible for that. They have an interest in this. They have an interest in portraying me as kooky as possible.
Yep.
And it's a very salient point. The media has an interest in discrediting their opponents, people who are not the status quo candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they don't fit the norm. They don't fit the box that the media wants them to.
And I think Jeremy Corbyn's a prime example, an obvious candidate for that. So my dad, who, bless him, he's fairly liberal, he's fairly open-minded, he tries to read alternate news sources, but he does get most of his information from the mainstream media. And yesterday on Facebook he blocked me because I came out in support of Jeremy Corbyn, who's and he's how can you support that terrorist sympathising?
You know what? Just send him some
anti-Semitic.
Send him some Michael Brooks or Sam Cedar videos because they talk about this nonsense anti-Corbyn pro-terrorist Nazi stuff all the time. And they break it down.
You can see when there's a smear campaign going on because there just becomes constant and consistent talking points.
Yeah.
I saw a great breakdown that says the right does this all the time because it can't hinge on deep analysis. So it just uses repetition of the same talking points again and again and again.
That's a really good point. They can't rely on that at all. Which is
so to the casual observers, which is most of the electorate, right? Like if you ask people, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, like Labour's got a problem with anti-Semitism," and you're like, "Okay, let's go into the facts." And it's like 0.001% of people have been investigated for some anti-Semitic things. I'm not saying that there isn't any anti-Semitism in any organisation in British politics, but I think if you reported on the Conservative rate of anti-Semitism, I'd be surprised if you didn't find that different. And also, you kind of conflating anti-Semitism with Israel's current actions, right? Like, and it all gets a bit convoluted. It doesn't matter. You just repeat that lie enough times, and now anyone's going to be like, "Why are you supporting anti-Semitism, Chris?" I'm like, "I know that's not what I'm about."
Because now, even if you speak to liberals, for example, I have plenty of friends who support Liberal Democrats in the UK. If you ask them, like, okay, but where's anti-Semitism coming from? Well, it's from the Women Party. Okay, but where are you getting this information from? Well, it's in the news. Yeah, but where is the evidence that there's anti-Semitism? Oh, because everyone knows it. It's like, well, but do you have any concrete examples whatsoever?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, Ken Livingstone said that Hitler wanted to deport the Jews, and it's like, well, technically, yeah, but it's not exactly wrong. It's not exactly anti-Semitic. But do you have anything else? Like, are there swastikas inside the Labour Party headquarters? I mean, where I don't know. It's really frustrating to have that kind of argument, because you're not discussing Labour policies. You're not discussing what Corbyn wants or what Corbyn says.
And that's what they don't want to discuss,
Yeah.
right? Like, because Labour want to discuss, can we please not privatise the National Healthcare Service, right?
Well,
they don't want to discuss that.
Well, they want to roll back everything from Thatcher onwards. They want to go back to how it was, before Margaret Thatcher, and that's excellent. Corbyn came out and said that there shouldn't be billionaires, and every single left-thinking individual in the UK should have gone, "Oh yeah, that is actually what we believe in. We should rally behind this guy."
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. Your politics are kind of funny to me, or in Britain, I should say. The other day, I couldn't figure out why the fuck there is a party. Why do the Lib Dems even exist? And I had to look it up, and I did a deep dive, Wikipedia and some history, and I figured out it was a merging of a couple other parties, but what they offer is it's nothing. It's who are they don't offer anyone anything.
It's the people that are proudly centrist.
Yes. That's what,
the by centrist, for centrist.
Yeah, the educated, third way types.
Even left of centre offends them. I think the funny thing with the Lib Dems is if there was proportional representation in the UK, they'd do really well, which is an argument for proportional representation. But then you look at the stats and you're like, okay, so would the Brexit Party? So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Well,
why do you want democracy within your democracy? I mean, I think the UK system's worked fine. You got two parties. You got the aristocracy and the plebs, and what else do you need, really? We're discussing UK politics right now. It just boils down to Brexit, and we've already done an episode about Brexit, even though
I did an episode on that, so we would never have to mention it again. So moving on.
But with US politics, however, that's just like a garbage fire, and it's just beautiful to watch. And it's just late stage capitalism coming home to roost. And I think this is why, as I said, I'm Swedish, and I care so much more about US politics than I do about Swedish politics, because who cares about Swedish politics? But why doesn't Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren join forces?
Well, I think that's probably something that's going to eventually happen in a few months into the actual primaries. One of them's going to have to drop out. Hopefully it's Warren. The way the American system works, you can't it'd be hard for them to to really work together at this stage.
Are they both hoping to be Biden?
They also I mean, Biden's going down in the polls, and Bernie is going up in the polls.
Because there's false hope that if you have someone central and bland enough that it'll appeal to this mythological average central person that exists. Right. But it doesn't, right? Like a lot of the people that voted for Trump had voted for Obama.
Yes.
That they will vote for anyone that offers change, and unfortunately does well in the polls. Centrist establishment candidate is not that, and isn't appealing to anyone really, right?
Yeah, Bernie and Warren actually, they don't have, surprisingly, much overlap in terms of their voting base. For Warren, it's basically all, white middle class women who were upset that Hillary didn't win, and they still want their female representation. So they're a little bit more happy with Warren. But if you ask them, those voters, who their second choice is, it's usually Bernie or Buttigieg or someone else. It's really Sanders that has the only truly diverse and populist and proletariat type base.
Yeah, I got to be honest though, I'm losing hope. So I went for beers. I just was in a pub talking to a friend 2 nights ago, and as Americans do, random American overheard and came and joined in the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And he was, Silicon Valley tech guy with money.
Andrew Yang?
No, it wasn't Andrew Yang, unfortunately. But I just left that conversation so devoid of hope, because he managed to convince me that it'll probably be Trump again. Because that's most people's perception is that, Trump inherited a good economy and he's doing well with it. So
there's a high chance he's right. if you're saying that Biden's winning the polls, but I think that he might get the nomination. Because at the end, people are just going to chicken out and they'll go for the establishment guy. And
Well, the Democrat
Biden
Party
versus
seems to
Trump
be
is
the
just
sort.
going to be crucified. It's just going to be 2016 all over again.
Biden might be crucified, but Biden doesn't have the same baggage that Hillary Clinton had. He has the same problem that Hillary Clinton had in terms of not being able to energize the Democratic base or get new voters. No one's going to be excited about Biden.
Yeah.
And this is why the left lose, right? Because not enough people show up to vote.
Well, I'm not convinced that Biden, in fact, will win. Bernie, I think, is winning in Iowa. He's winning in Nevada. And there's still a few months left for him to get his message out. And I think there's 1 or 2 more debates. If the Democrats allow a fucking debate with less than 12 people, where Bernie,
right, dilution of
they might be
branding,
doing this on
Jesus.
purpose.
If you think.
I mean, if Bernie gets on stage when he has time to speak, and there's only like 5 of them, let's say, that ought to make a difference, and that'll make people tune in. It's almost as if they don't want people to tune in because they're doing the same fucking massive debates each time now.
Yeah.
You don't get a majority by having 100 people speak at the same time. I
Yeah.
don't get it.
And it means that everyone
Jesus.
has like 2 minutes to say their piece, and what's his face from Futurama has the same amount of time as Biden or Sanders.
Warren.
Or, yeah, Warren. So you have these like absolute just nobodies, these suits who you're standing there taking up space and time. Yang, because it's funny to have him there, and I don't know who the other 20 people are, but
Booker
you become fatigued just watching it.
It is fatiguing, but there is some hope in that the polls not only do they skew older, because there's also the fact that the people they call are the likely voters. So people who are already registered Democrats, all this stuff, or people who voted before. And Bernie's whole thing is that he's trying to get as many new voters as possible. So he may be underrepresented in the polls, kind of like Trump was underrepresented in the polls. So yeah, he may have that going for him.
Yeah, and I've seen Bernie's team has a good social media game actually. Yeah, for an old man, he's got spirit. So one can only hope. And like, even if he ends up losing in the end, I just hope the chance for him and Trump to debate. You know, ultimately, I want just to see that debate
that'd
of
be good.
hope and ideas versus bluster and more of the same nonsense. Jesus.
Yeah, there's some hope.
Although, of course, Trump might be impeached by then, so might be Sanders versus Mike Pence, which would, again, hilarious.
Yes.
Oh, Christ.
Oh, what a shit
I
show.
know, it's just compelling.
I can't say this with a straight face. I can't believe these are the options.
Well, maybe let's talk about messaging, maybe then, and how any Democratic nominee, what they ought to be talking about, instead of some of the mistakes that the left in general and people like Hillary Clinton have been making.
Well, so for me, Hillary Clinton was couldn't have been more of an establishment candidate in a very clearly anti-establishment election.
But no,
right?
she
Yeah.
told young people to Pokemon go to the polls. That speaks to the kids.
She dabbed.
Oh my god.
She did everything that a focus group told her to do. Right, like it
Hot
was
sauce in,
business created a politician.
It's a hot sauce in her purse, speaking to a bunch of young black voters. Like, oh yeah, I always carry with me my Tabasco. It's like, no,
Oh my
no,
god.
you don't.
But then she referred to the flyover states, right, and said that anyone that wouldn't vote for her was a basket of deplorables. So, and how the media ran with that. and what a
Arguably
shitstorm
correct,
that
but
was.
it's bad optics.
Well, so this is my problem. I think there are a lot of things that people on the left do to really piss off the right and the centre.
Yep.
But even when they're not busy doing that, they're attacking their own as well. I mean, you've got more time on Twitter than I do, Swole. I don't know how you handle that shit show personally.
Well, to be honest, most of the big drama that's been going on, I didn't get really much into that. Like, I just kind of saw it happen.
That's not true. I saw you defending Vosh, right?
Yeah, but I did get in a fight. I did get in a Twitter fight with some with Chrisiosity. She was very upset with. Oh, it was Vosh. Was that the one you saw?
Yeah.
She blocked me.
Yeah, well, good. Why do you want to talk to these people? I don't understand.
I just wish, because if they could just fucking, like, someone like Chrisiosity would just talk to Vosh, Like literally, you'd understand that like everything you believed was retarded.
And again, just by saying retarded, you're going to be in trouble with a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And I think this is interesting though, because, and you alluded to it before, there's a few new ways young people are getting into the left, right? And there's the Twitter mobs that are woke scolding everyone and going around in circles, and then you have the people that come from the Twitch route,
yes,
right? Which, as you said, right,
the gamers
who are
no, that's a great
just having fun, chit chatting, and those two groups don't seem to mix well at all.
And you know what? We do need like the gaming route is new, and that's something we really need to be doing because the alt-right. Steve Bannon, these guys figured out very early on that this is the way to get, I mean, young men really, and that's the prime target for fascists. So they were right on it, quick.
So journalist Robert Evans, he did a whole bunch of research on this, and he discovered that the fascists, they were on the internet way sooner than everyone else, like late 80s, early 90s. They realized that the internet was going to be the next battleground, and so YouTube was at first like dominated with sort of alt-right voices, and it's nice to see that the left is gaining space, like gaining ground within that sort of battlefield. But it's like this. It's like the Spanish Civil War. It's you fight off the Franco's troops, and then you turn around and you start shooting at each other. It's ridiculous.
Well, not only that, we're getting hit by YouTube, big time, because they just changed their rules to make the algorithms to make it so that corporate media gets all the search results now. And that was after the alt-right had and conservative channels had years and years of time to build up their audiences, while we on the left
InfoWars, and when LeftTube finally got started,
now we got hit with this, and we're gonna have a much harder time gaining that same audience. But we got to fight the fight.
Well, thank God the big corporations aren't on the side of fascists. I mean, that would be again very anti-historical.
Yes, indeed.
Someone like PewDiePie, for example, right, who gets accused of being right-wing. For me, it very much comes across as like that South Park shock culture, like just say offensive things. And I don't think he, started off as some part of corporate scheme to turn people more right-wing. But I can also see how you'd become radicalized, because if you're just, chatting shit and saying irreverent stuff and don't really care who you offend, and then you have people on the right that are like, haha, we love you, that's funny, and people on the left who are like trying to hold an inquisition and trying to get you kicked off and demonetized off all your platforms, well, you're not going to switch left in that situation, are you?
Yeah, no, exactly. And the right likes to adopt popular culture, all kinds of things as their own, which is why the subscribe to PewDiePie thing became kind of a racialized alt-right dog whistle. And PewDiePie after the Christchurch shooting, PewDiePie finally kind of wised up to that, and he changed. But it doesn't matter, because the left still won't forgive him for being that ignorant, because of his audience. They want to paint him as alt-right or dog whistling, or even if he's not, that he's still contributing to this stochastic terrorism. But I think it's a losing strategy for the left, because we're scared. Like he's got 100 million 9-year-old subscribers, and if they all think the left is a bunch of virtue signaling, woke scolding,
cancel culture,
right?
Well,
and
it is slightly problematic. I mean, I'm not going to stand up for PewDiePie too much. I mean, he's my countryman and everything, but it's also problematic that if you tell 100 million subscribing 9-year-olds that gas the juice, it's fine to say that, or
in context.
Yeah.
In context, like he's not saying gas the Jews. He was trying to see what he could get away with in terms of the most absurd thing possible. And when I was in my teens, I would absolutely be doing the same things. We used to draw swastikas on each other when we were drunk, and penises, like anything, the most absurd, the most outrageous thing that you could imagine an adult getting offended by. That is what you would do or say, not because of you believed anything, but yeah.
And I think you're right. Like, context is very important. And if you've watched his other content, he's mainly appealing to autistic 12-year-olds. God bless him. But if you compare that to Count Dankula training his dog, whatever he did.
Yeah.
If you don't
Yeah,
watch
the pug did a Nazi salute.
exactly,
Yeah.
and obviously that's stupid prank, bro. Yeah, don't worry. But when you listen to his other stuff, you get the context that this guy actually he's slightly right wing, a little bit,
Dankula, yeah.
Yeah. But it's again hiding behind this is just a joke, bro. It's just a joke, just triggering the libs. Are you mad? Context, I think, is very important. I mean, that's why I don't think.
Yeah, but Twitter doesn't handle context very well, does it?
No. Twitter and like, I mean, I made a whole video about it because I wanted to make the point that, like, yeah, PewDiePie. You could accuse him of being a shitty guy or inconsiderate of what he's doing, but you can't seriously call him kind of a self-aware ideological fighter for the alt-right. You could call him.
Yeah.
You could definitely say he was influenced by anti-SJW content. I was too for years, because they are ridiculous humans, and
Yeah, it's obnoxious.
it's obnoxious, yeah, and it makes for good cringe videos.
So I think we all have that in common. Like, and I went down that rabbit hole of YouTube and the algorithm suggestions. And before we get too against the algorithm, that's how I found you, Swole. So it does some things right. Yeah,
Wait,
yeah.
what was
You
the
were
first
suggested
video? What was the first video? Which one?
But Baby It's Dumb Outside.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Baby It's Dumb Outside was suggested in the thing. But anyway, before we get into that.
What were you watching to have that being suggested?
Well, like, again, these anti-SJW like videos, right? And you kind of it makes sense and it's appealing and it's everything that's wrong with the left. And I came at it from a position of not against them, but as a leftist person myself, how can these guys be better? Playing devil's advocate, how can we be more persuasive? How can we finally win a fucking election?
So had you seen other leftist content that kind of criticized liberal identity politics from the left?
Not much, but I started to, because I went further and further down this rabbit hole of like more the right wing people, and then like Sam Harris alt-right, like Bill Maher claiming to be liberal, but really only ever attacking like. Most of them attack both sides vaguely. Sam Harris will come out and say Trump's a bad person. I guess in America that's a radical opinion.
Yeah, no, seriously.
But and it's the thing, you understand the problems of social justice warriors, but then the last two interviews with Sam Harris I've seen, the guest did a really good opportunity of being like, okay, but it's very easy to straw person those opinions, but also, there is valid research and valid cause for concerns about the number of African Americans in jail and being shot. And people like that never engage with those data. They just write off the whole movement.
Right.
And I realised I was guilty of that same thing as well. So I think probably it was through ContraPoints where I started watching videos, and T1J, where it's videos of the left discussing the nuance and what was wrong with the left.
Yeah, ContraPoints I think was the best for that. ContraPoints is a normie, but a trans normie. So I mean, she's the best of all worlds. A leftist trans normie.
And there's a beautiful video where she admitted that she used to be a white guy with dreadlocks, and talking about cultural appropriation from a former transgressor sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, she used to be an edgelord, but before her ContraPoints channel, she was I think a YouTube skeptic. I think like atheist type, debatey type, very very masculine in her kind of behavioral presentation.
Well, the thing with ContraPoints is that she brought production values to YouTube, or to BreadTube rather, I suppose, left YouTube, and it's like color and vibrancy and acting.
It's the difference between black and white and color, right?
However, but the content, I think ContraPoint is a very, very important YouTuber. Before that, I wasn't able to quite express my own personal problems I had with politics generally, and she vocalized things which I personally felt really, really well. And I'm like, oh wow, there are people out there who vaguely subscribe to the same worldview as myself, and I think she's a very important YouTuber generally.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But she got chased off of Twitter, right?
Yeah, she got
Why?
chased off for a month. Did you not hear about this, Tobias?
I don't have Twitter. I don't follow it. I have no idea what's happening on Twitter.
She made a comment out of nowhere, just saying that sometimes in hyper woke spaces, that she feels she can be made to feel uncomfortable when people are asked to go around in the circle and give and say their pronouns. And for someone who's, male at birth but wants to be perceived as female, having to state your pronouns is kind of what's the word they use?
Invokes gender dysphoria.
Yeah. It's kind of triggering.
And there is this old debate because, like, older people, right? All they wanted to do was pass.
Yes.
Right, so it's just this generational divide between the new generation that's like, oh, we should always keep asking people what pronouns they want to talk about, and then the older generation is just like, I'd just be very happy if we never raise the subject again. Thanks. That'd be
Right.
awesome.
So non-binary people, that they thought they were being erased by this comment, because non-binary people, they all use they. They need to go around. They need to have spaces where, I guess, everybody knows that they're a they and not a she or a he or whatever. Whereas most trans people, as far as I know, they are binary. They like the binary. They want to stay in it, and they don't want to have their gender questioned or have any. They have different interests in these situations, and that's all she was saying, and that it can make trans people uncomfortable, and Twitter went off on her because most of her fans are non-binary or trans babies, hyper woke SJWs, and they were not having it. They called her NB phobic, and that she was endangering NBs or non. That's what they call non-binary people.
Because I listened to your bad takes video about this, and I just didn't know what she said in the beginning to actually cause this whole outrage.
Yeah, it was nothing.
But it's stupid. It's really stupid. I mean, the whole thing.
And it's really annoying as well because, number one, this isn't how we're going to win a fucking election. This really smacks of the sort of leftist stuff where it's like, it's middle class people debating wine glass etiquette.
Yeah.
Like, it's just noise that no one really gives a shit about. And
yeah, it definitely comes off that way.
I think the average working class person, if you say, look, it's a bit rude to make fun of trans people, they'll be like, all right, cool, whatever, right? Like, they might not be ahead of the curve, but they're getting it, right? Okay, cool. But not only make it a huge issue, but you actually kick off then one of your biggest supporters and one of the best people on YouTube is like, for what game? What are you trying to do other than just virtue signal to your fucking in-group that you're more woke than a famous person?
Well, and this gets down to what I was what I'm talking about here in that the book I wrote you guys on the page. That you may or may not have read through. It's the problem is, well, I also mentioned in the video, is that they're coming analytically from kind of this postmodern intersectional perspective where the goal of politics is problematization almost. It's to be political, to be an activist is to point out and out microaggressions and areas where someone has been problematic, and that pointing these out will somehow, this observation that you've figured out or you've exposed is what's going to level the playing field, rather than a Marxist class analysis where go out and organize and flip the system. They're entirely two different approaches, and the one that Team Woke is on is that it leads them to use the logic of capitalism, because on Twitter, on social media, where they can actually practice these things, everything's about social capital and getting likes and getting retweets. So that's the only game they can play.
Right, and that's why social media slacktivism just reeks of impotent capitalism, right? Like you're not even earning that much money; you're just getting likes. That's what you're
no
doing,
money,
keeping
mostly.
the platform going. Yeah, well, other than the platform, which likes the attention that it's getting from all of these witch hunts.
You used a beautiful phrase. I think it was the neoliberalization of identity politics.
Yes.
Yeah, it was something similar, but it just resonated, like trying to put your finger on what's actually wrong with these people, and it's the fact that they're not really in it for the social change; they're in it for
Social capital.
social capital. Thank you. Yes,
Because they've been co-opted by the system to work for the system.
yeah.
And the problem with all this noise is that it doesn't work on right-wing people, and they're not even trying. Right. You get no points for pointing out that right-wing person is right. The only way to earn social capital in this rewards-based point system is to be the wokest of the woke, and that you're not even like you're pissing in the tent, but you're also just making it smaller and smaller and smaller. No one will survive the witch hunt, and there are these people who got off Twitter and quit the left even because they were like used to be one of those guys, right?
I don't understand how you can quit the left, though. I mean,
Sorry?
Well, that kind of left. You quit being a little bitch.
no. What I mean is like going back to Dave Rubin, who like quit the left, and that strikes me as someone who wasn't actually leftist to begin with.
No, never.
And again, it's just grifters, basically.
There's some YouTubers. I think every person who's looking to make money through clicks and likes, at a certain point, becomes trapped in the system, right? A victim of the algorithm. I can point out some politicians like Owen Jones, who I always feel is kind of disingenuous and says the most woke thing he can think of at any point, and it never really feels from the heart or particularly for any other purpose other than him getting votes. So, yeah, assholes abound, I guess.
But is it difficult for us on the left to see those? Like, I'm sure that people on the right will happily point out any leftist figure and point out why they're...
So here's an example of it that and we alluded to it earlier, dog whistling. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that term a few times, and I understand what it means, right? The idea that you're saying in code something racist or secretive. I kind of think that that's the left's version of QAnon, because you end up with this conspiracy theory, right? Like, you're never quite sure, you think everyone's talking in code that only you can decipher. I think that's one of the blind spots that we have. And that
well, you know what?
Might be a dog whistle.
There's some truth to that. But it's a little bit like conspiracy theories, because some of them there's really some shit. So if you let's say you get into I don't know, TWA Flight 800 or JFK assassination, and you realize
Epstein.
Epstein's a perfect example. Say you get real deep into that, then you start to see, okay, well, if the government can do this, then what else is it doing? And you start uncovering all the theories. There's infinite ones out there, and a lot of them are utter nonsense. And then you get into conspiracy.
But there is some smoke and there is some fire. I think the big example I've seen is the idea of the white race is declining.
Oh yeah,
and that is hinted to often on Fox News, and they won't say it outright, but they're alluding to a theory that cuts very deep off the cliff of the far right.
Well, it's the Great Replacement Theory.
Talks about the white genocide. Yeah, Great Replacement Theory, and then a bit further on that is white genocide, is what it's called, right?
No, I think that dog whistles really do exist, and the thing is, like, in polite society, in mainstream society, there's no space for fascist or white supremacist
outright racism.
Exactly.
Which is why Sam Harris gets so offended when it gets leveled against him, right? Like, and he's so quick to defend it.
The right are trying to get on TV. They're trying to spread their message, but they can't use the language, or else they get kicked off, they get booted. So they have to, by definition, speak in dog whistles. They have to talk about Western civilization. They have to talk about birth rates, crime statistics,
declining house prices.
So when Corbyn says there shouldn't be billionaires, do you think he's dog whistling to the radical left that we should be starting sharpening our guillotines?
Yes, I do.
You know what? There might actually be left-wing dog whistles. I don't think that means grifting, it might actually. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I mean, he's also correct in saying there shouldn't be billionaires.
I think Stalin grifted the left quite successfully.
Stalin was a grifter.
Yeah,
but like contemporary, I'm sure there's some contemporary YouTubers.
People, virtue signaling, but however, it's difficult because I take these people at their word, and I'm hoping that they want to change society, abolish capitalism, try to make the world a better place, but.
I could pick on, so an example of that, I could pick on some annoying feminist YouTubers, which are, cliched examples to give. You end up just straw manning, and both sides are guilty of this, right? Picking the most obvious, Dave Rubin. Like, we don't need the world doesn't need another Dave Rubin takedown video at this point. Like, clearly the man has a cheese sandwich for a brain.
Mayonnaise.
like, we can just move on, right? Like, so, and it's the same with people on the left, I can find examples of very interesting and thoughtful feminists and...
Ooh, there's a guy, what the hell, Brendan O'Neill?
Oh, yes, again, who claims to be left, and he's a leftist in reform.
Yeah, I would call him Griffin.
The one I'm thinking of is the video sent Bit Maher.
Oh,
I can't
God.
pronounce his surname. But
Yeah,
however,
we were talking about him.
He doesn't
Yeah,
know what the left is. He's a liberal.
yeah, exactly. Well, he's badly a liberal, but yeah, no, neoliberal stooge. And what he says, it's pretty right wing.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's the sort of left where he thinks, America needs to bond freedom and liberalism into more countries, right? That's
But he's definitely a grifter, and liberals listen to him for some reason.
I think we've just discovered right there this is what the grift is. It's on the left, because it's not actual, for the most part. I don't think it is leftist. I think it's liberals who because America is so right wing, they think of themselves as the left because no one else is.
they're slightly better than Trump.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They're
sure.
not. Yeah, they're not Noam Chomsky by any stretch, but they're better than Trump. They're better than any
They
Republican.
voted for Obama, right?
Exactly,
So
right. So they think of themselves.
They have a whole pass
They're the
for
good
eternity.
guys. They're the good guys. They voted for the blue team, so they think of themselves as the left, but they are grifters. The Sam Harris's, the Bill Maher's, even like Trevor Noah, and increasingly now Colbert even sometimes has.
Yeah, I get depressed watching Colbert these days. But because I remember him back in the day with the Colbert Report, which was brilliant. But
Brilliant,
also thinking, oh yeah, John Oliver, watching him do his segment on Venezuela. I'm thinking,
yep.
oh no, oh John, oh no.
Yeah, he's had a couple bad takes, but
Yeah,
for the most part, he's got good liberal takes. But liberals gonna be liberals. You can't trust them.
Yeah, and I think Doug Stanhope does a great take on all these comedians, like laughing at, look at what the American war machine did last night. Isn't that funny? And he's like, no, it's not. It makes me fucking angry. Why are we laughing about it? And I think Citations Needed hits on this point. I don't know if you've checked that out, but I really recommend it.
YouTube channel?
Citations Needed. It's a fantastic podcast, and they break down how the media. They're two very smart journalists, and they break down how the media just apologizes for and makes normal what really shouldn't be excusable. And it looks at the headlines sort of like, oh, America is sliding towards war with Iran, as if it's like carelessly. Whoops! Oh no! I've started World War III again. How careless of me.
Accident. I mean, didn't we literally almost get into a war with Iran like a couple months ago?
they've been trying.
Iran. Yeah, Iran keeps having to de-escalate the situation, but aggressively keep positioning their country next to America's battleships, right?
Yeah,
so, and you've got the big orange man with the big red button. That's fucking terrifying.
The whole war with Iran thing created a weird paradox for leftists, because you have people then going, but Trump wanted a war, but now he can't get a war. Haha, let's laugh at Trump. He can't get the war, and you're like, no, this is good. Why are you people like this? Like, why do you have to play into that stereotype of orange man bad? Everything he does has to be bad.
But the flip side of that is there's this perception that, Obama started all these wars, but actually Trump hasn't started as many wars, and you're like... And that's the liberal lie, right there.
Well, hold on. What did
that they're both as bad as each other, right? That's the lie I keep hearing.
What did Obama? Which did?
Well, lots of drone strikes, right?
Oh, right.
Syria,
but that's the thing, though. It's not
Syria.
a lot of details.
I would have liked
but
I would have liked if he had gone much harder on Syria. They might have actually changed that.
But he tried to.
Yes,
they shot him down in Congress.
And Britain as well, right? Like, got shot down, it couldn't get pushed through Parliament. And part of the reason was because of the war in Iraq, everyone kind of felt that they couldn't trust the Americans when they had intel anymore. That was the fallout and the collateral damage
Libya.
of the war in Iraq.
Libya.
Yes.
That's right. Libya was a big. Well, that was Clinton was the cheerleader for that one. And she got her wish, and it all went to shit.
But so this is the story I've been fed, that the Democrats are as bad as the Republicans. And I believed it, to be fair, but when you look at the statistics, like Trump has just been ramping up the numbers of drone strikes pretty steadily and consistently. And I think that's the danger of like just giving up and being like, oh, they're all as bad as each other, is that...
Well, a fascinating thing about Trump is that he's using the tools left by his predecessor. So Obama wasn't a saint, but he was very charismatic, so we love him. He's utilizing Obama's immigration policies to massively expand this whole for-profit concentration camps on the border. The drone strike program, Trump has expanded. So yeah, no, the Democrats certainly left a bunch of tools, which Obama was using.
Right. But to be fair to them, they were 99% sure they were going to have Clinton come in afterwards.
True. To start a war with Russia.
To start a war with Russia. Yeah, shit. Yeah.
And Iran.
See, yeah, I mean the Democrats, yeah, they're better domestically, unquestionably, but around the world, imperialism wise, they're probably no better. Yeah.
So let me tie this all together. Like. Everything we just described, for-profit children's concentration camps, right?
They exist.
Looming war with Iran, right? All of these things. Why the hell are there people debating how woke ContraPoints is? Like, what the fuck is wrong with this situation?
Yeah. This is because I mean, social media creates its own world. I think. YouTube creates its own world. People can escape.
Do you think this was happening in Weimar, Germany? So obviously Weimar Germany, famously very, very liberal leading up to the Nazis. There was like legalized gay marriage and
except for the murdering of Rosa Luxemburg.
Oh yeah. Well, not a good time to be communist. But however, I wonder if they were sitting around going, "Oh, Hans is using the wrong pronouns, and we're German, so there's 14 of them." I don't know anything about German.
So you joke, but I guess so, because one of the famous book burnings that the Nazis did, right? A lot of those books were about gender science.
Yeah.
I think I heard.
No, I'm not joking.
So I guess it was a rising concern and battle at the time.
Yeah, I'm not joking about Weimar Germany being the most progressive country on the planet at the time. Trans rights, gay rights, all these radical things in 1920.
Yeah, and 1920s Germany was probably still the most progressive place on the planet for another 50 years.
Yeah. And do you think this is whilst people were arguing about pronouns, this is when the Nazis were like, yeah, we'll just goose step into this situation? I mean, I'm a historian, so I know that there's other things involved.
Yeah. I mean, was the left was the left distracted? Was there a lot of infighting in Germany? I don't know.
Yeah. So you have like the I don't know if you know about a group called Antifa,
yes.
But they're famously they've been using the three arrows symbol.
Yeah.
And so the three arrows was used by the Social Democrats, and someone pointed out that, well, the Social Democrats, they were against the communists.
Yeah.
And Antifa, they were originally communist.
Yeah.
So Antifa is using Antifa symbolism. And you're like, this is very complicated. But yes, the left was fighting with itself in the 1930s. This is why the right could pretty much just, goose step into power.
Yeah.
So is this inevitable then? Is it just the left's desire to be moral and good means that you're forever sat debating what is moral and good while everyone else is picking up arms and winning elections?
The historical materialist viewpoint is that people are going to want money, and so they don't want communists coming in and taking away their money. So it's better to turn right than turn left.
Well, the liberals will, right. But the job of the left then is to build parallel systems outside of the state that take care of people, to build good favor with the general public, and to make the state irrelevant. And that's a big piece of the puzzle that tends to be missing in many of the revolutions that have gone on and failed.
What, dismantling the state?
Well, dismantling the state, obviously, but to dismantle the state, you can't just dismantle the state on its own. You'll have chaos. You need these parallel systems and organization kind of already in place.
Yeah.
So
bottom up rather than top down.
But that too. But you just need a community organizing. You need to have like what the Black Panthers did. This is what they were famous for, is they providing, school meals and like a lot of the services for the community just got taken over, but the Black Panthers would just do them, would just do things that the state would have otherwise done. Whatever the state wasn't doing, the Black Panthers were doing.
But isn't that a right-wing libertarian ideal as well, that like people shouldn't look to the state for a handout but be organising their own community groups?
I don't think. Well, the right-wing version is that everybody should just be free individuals, and they shouldn't have to rely on each other.
Sure, but I mean, look, and it gets complex and simplified when you do a false left-right dichotomy, right? So, but the right wing do hide behind libertarianism as their shield.
A lot of them do, yeah.
Right?
A lot of them say it's...
Yeah, so the libertarian argument I've heard, rather than muddy the waters with left-right, is that, the same thing. People should be forming their own security groups rather than forming a big state group.
Right, but the big thing that the right libertarians and ANCAPs miss is that, so they hate the state. They want the state gone. They want to be able to, or at least to do as little as possible. Except the problem is, to protect property rights and to protect the rules of the market, that's basically the only reason the state exists. Like, there's 1,700 different departments of state in the United States. They are all exist to regulate and to facilitate different aspects of capitalism. That's why the state exists.
Yes, and this isn't Marxist propaganda conspiracy theory here, right? Like, every time there's been a mass strike, the police have shown up not to arrest the
Yes.
board of directors, but the protesters, right? Like, it's very clear they didn't show up to arrest the oil company for polluting the land.
original was the Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. It originally was written as every man has a right to life, liberty, and property. And they're like, that's a little bit too on the nose. We should probably change that to happiness.
Yeah, no, exactly. Private property.
Yeah, I believe that UK have similar provisions as well about the protection of people's property, because it's very important that the state protects property.
Yeah, that's
reason.
what it's there for. So which
Protects the income from their third home.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the reason objectivism, libertarianism is all one big joke. They don't get it.
I think it's because you have that diagram, the left, right, authoritarian, libertarian, and it's because they need to put something in the bottom right, and they don't realize that it's actually just a vacuum.
Yes.
I mean, what is right libertarian? Just everyone sitting racistly scowling at each other without the power to do anything.
Yeah, well, right libertarian is kind of, I mean, that whole spectrum is kind of a joke. Like, there's right libertarian is an oxymoron. Right means hierarchy. It means built-in hierarchies. And the only way to maintain hierarchies is with authoritarianism.
I always assumed that right-wing meant more sort of a focus on individualism, and left-wing was more sort of focus on collective.
That's a fantasy made up by Ayn Rand, basically, and her school. Like that, you could make a pretty good argument that Marxism, if anything, or even liberalism, are very individualist, because the whole Marx writes that the whole point of socialism and communism is to emancipate the individual. That's the whole part of it. The way you do that is through socialized production. But for Marx, he makes clear that the whole point is to free the individual and to let the individual live the kind of life they want to live, to the greatest degree possible.
So, gents, I think you've gathered, because I tend to play the conservative everyman role on these podcasts. I'm not down with the kids when it comes to communism, right? Like, I've heard all the arguments, and to a large extent still accept them. So, communism's killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
I would still probably describe myself as a capitalist. The problem is, although I never believed in communist propaganda, shall we say, I'm starting to notice the cracks in capitalist propaganda too, and it's not quite delivering on its promise or dreams.
Have you read?
So I'm open-minded to you guys, but I'm skeptical as well.
Well, first of all, let's just disabuse you of the idea that communism is killed equal to or even more than capitalism has in the last, let's say, century. That is easily debunkable.
First of all, can I just point out that whilst Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos are still alive, communism hasn't killed enough people. But... Sorry,
on.
but go on.
Before we get hit by a drone strike.
The other point was, what the hell was the other thing?
No, I still need the point though. So you're going to debunk that communism hasn't killed loads of people. I'm going to need you to dive deep.
If you want me to dive deeper, well, the main line is that that book that came out, like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, 100 million deaths under communism. That book is a joke. Most of the deaths they account for would be like people dying, just like literally just people dying of natural causes under communism. A lot of it was famines. A lot of it was famine.
Ukraine's famine was not natural.
That was like
causes,
10 million
though,
people.
Right? Yeah, that's a good amount, man.
It is a good amount, but it doesn't add up to 100 million. And if you actually compare it to capitalist deaths,
this sounds very tanky now, right?
No. If you the way that people die under capitalism by poverty and malnutrition, you can easily make the case that more people die under capitalism. If you use the same criteria that you did for that book, then, well, first of all, the book lied in a few cases, and second of all, capitalism could easily match those numbers.
But at the same point, in capitalist countries, people die just over a long period of time. Right?
You also can't blame communism or socialism itself as a system on Holodomor. You can blame a famine plus Stalin's policies making it worse. Stalin blocked food getting, I think, either in or out of there, and that had nothing to do with actual socialization.
That's what Winston Churchill did with Bengal during the Second World War as well, where 10 million people died. But we don't say that, for example, every time that the East India Company starved 11 million people to death in India, like in 1800s, we don't count that as deaths under capitalism.
Oh yeah, China too.
And maybe a historian will be charitable and say, oh well, that's colonialism which killed those people, but it's technically capitalism if you're going to go by the same metric as those 100 million who died under communism, which again it's bullshit.
Yeah. Either way, that argument isn't really important to why communism or socialism is necessary going forward.
What's important is that you will have a better life under socialism.
Well, what's really important is that we won't all die in a flaming ball of fire on Earth, because we'll be able to actually stop commodity production and collectively clean up the planet and stop putting so much CO2 in the air.
Doesn't this all sound a bit utopian, though, guys?
Ever heard Marxist utopia? I mean, this is what we're aiming for.
So yeah, the thing is, you're never supposed to actually get to the utopia. The idea is that you're always aiming for it, rather than capitalism just says, okay, this is what we got. We've got our social democracy, liberal capitalism. We're just going to stick with this, and there's no end game, and we're going to do it until either we all die or it just goes on till infinity. But it can't go on until infinity, because capitalism is an infinite growth system. There's a finite resources on this planet. It's coming to a head now, especially with the financialization of the economy. There's nowhere for money to go anymore. There's nowhere to invest. Like prices of real estate in cities are going up because that's the last place capitalists have to put their money now. And when that all gets full, there's going to be another crisis, a major crisis.
Well,
yes, but no, I'll just bump in there, because it never has been, because of everything you just discussed, it's never been cheaper to borrow money to start a business. It's very easy to start your own business, right? And here's my argument. If 100 people want to form a collective farm, right, what's to stop them doing it in this system? Why can't 100 people take out a small loan and divide the salary by 100?
Because the nature of a capitalist organization means that it can exploit its workers and the land better than a collective could, because a collective wouldn't choose to exploit themselves. Therefore, that capitalist company will always outcompete in a society that we have now.
So you want to stop the competition?
Well, you wouldn't have competition in a proper socialist or communist society. You would just have I mean, you could have competition, but it wouldn't be necessary. You would communally decide, okay, what needs to be produced, how much of it, and a lot of this stuff has actually already been worked out. A lot of the problems with USSR distribution of goods is that they just didn't have a good system for figuring out how to distribute resources. And now with Amazon and Walmart, we already know that you can very accurately predict where things need to go, how much stuff you need in the future, and how to distribute a planned economy.
Okay, so a lot of the solution is technocracy, right? Like
yeah.
the
You don't even need that, but yeah, that's part
data.
of it.
Yeah, the irony is
Because-
that it's Amazon who pretty much
Yes.
cracked it
Yes.
in terms of the supply chain.
Because the fear is like the hello Demore, right? However you pronounce it. It wasn't just because of a poor distribution, right? It was because you had to overthrow a political class, and to do that, you had to get rid of a bunch of people who knew how to run things and replace them with people that didn't. And then
Well,
so you ended up with a bunch of unskilled farm managers, in effect, right?
There was more than that. They were actually repressing them directly and preventing them from either selling or getting food in. Yeah, because the famine was there. It wasn't just that they replaced kulaks with unskilled workers. It was that they actively tried to fuck them over.
Because again, Stalin's a grifter, and we don't really like him.
Stalin's a grifter, right?
I mean, some people like Stalin,
And China too, right? A lot of people died in China.
Oh yeah.
Is Mao bad?
China's weird.
Xi Jinping is a big time grifter.
Okay, so is there an example of a country that did communism well?
Sure, Paris Commune did it for a couple days.
Israeli kibbutz.
Rojava has an anarcho-communist, well, sort of
Rest in
anarcho-communist
peace, but yeah.
society, and they don't have a state, right? So they're
Oh yeah, and Vaush gave the Kurdish army as an example, I think.
yeah. I mean, you could even argue the Vietnam anti-imperialist forces against the United States. They had no state. They had no high command. They were the reason they were able to do so well is because they were fluid. They didn't have a big command structure. They were an anarchist fighting force.
Okay.
I was actually just going to throw in North Korea as an example there as well, because hilariously enough, North Korea used to do pretty well until the USSR collapsed and they couldn't get food anymore, and everyone started starving to death.
So I think you guys will always lose when I test you on pure communism, because as you've described, right, like there's never going to be like this pure utopian communism. It's going to have to be a series of, we need to improve this, now we need to work on this, and the next stage is this, and the next step is that. And likewise, like any ideal, I couldn't tell you what's an ideal capitalist state, right? So it's a false question,
Well,
but I'm happy to bail you out of, right?
I'd like to talk about that dichotomy, because capitalists often make this mistake, and it's because of the goddamn neoclassical economists. They all changed everybody's perception, because Marx and Ricardo and Adam Smith, they were analyzing capitalism as existed in the real world, because capitalism wasn't a product of some thought experiment. It wasn't say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we tried this out and overthrew feudalism, and then we have all these rules and the market should work this way? No, it capitalism is what it was, and it was Marx who ultimately figured it out. And then afterwards, you had these people like von Mises and Hayek and all these clowns who just imputed their own theories on how what capitalism ought to be, what pure capitalism should be. And then so that can give people arguments to like saying, oh, well, we've never had real communism before, real capitalism before, when actually we've had real capitalism the whole time, and there's no such thing as a purely free market. That would be antithetical to actual real existing capitalism. And then as far as communism goes, yeah, we've never been there, but I still don't think that we have to get off of capitalism for one thing, and at some point.
Yeah, and I can think of examples where all the countries we described as prototypically capitalist stopped that model. So the World War II effort, for example, right? They didn't go, oh, sorry, we can't build these tanks because it's not profitable. Let's let the free hand of the market take care of the Nazis, right? Like, so there's any time there's a major world crisis, we are able to break down these paradigms and break the rules. It's just if you ask an economist now, can we change anything, or could we rock the status quo a little bit and make a billionaire slightly less rich? The answer is no. That wouldn't be possible. There's no way we can change anything. We have to keep ploughing ahead with the status quo.
Yeah.
I suppose it's because after they can't invest in real estate anymore in big cities, what's left is basically building large bunkers to weather out the coming storm in like sort of neo-feudal societies, which they will forge themselves.
Even the real estate's fascinating. So London is a classic example where the percentage of empty houses is ridiculous because the whole thing is just a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
It's just people buying empty luxury properties off one another, and then they can say, the average house price in this area is huge, and so they build another even more luxury thing that no one lives in.
Yeah. Well, it is all a pyramid.
It's not sustainable. It's clearly
it's all a house of cards. All this money is hanging out in the air and in foreign banks.
And they all got caught out in the last recession, and then the answer to it was, we now have to have austerity so everyone can bail out the banks, who are going to continue doing the same thing. And this is why I see these revolutions happen. And it's not because a bunch of middle-class liberals on Twitter are debating what the correct etiquette is, but it's because this whole house of cards collapses, and then the whole system's fucked, and then guillotines will get sharpened, and that's when things will happen, not because we're talking about it. Right,
and you know what? That's what's likely... That's what's going to happen in the next. If the next recession in the United States doesn't kick off revolution, it'll still push people more to the right and more to the left. And then when the next real long-term recession or depression happens, and people really start to lose their jobs and things start to really go downhill, it's gonna be the fash versus the socialists pretty quick, and things will get bad.
It'll break in the US. I genuinely believe. I mean, as a man who dabbles in history, I genuinely believe that we're heading towards civil war in the US. Civil war, yeah.
Interesting.
I genuinely believe that things cannot carry on as they are at the moment. And again, Bernie Sanders, he's a real beacon of hope. And if he fails, things can't go on much longer as they are without something breaking. And breaking hard.
So you were surprised to hear civil war. Is that because you think a world war would kick off before a civil war was allowed to?
No, I just think civil war is like, it made sense that you could predict a civil war in the the 1800s when there was two distinct different modes of production. And this, I mean, if it would fit right into the Marxist view of history, different class interests fighting with each other. Whereas it's so integrated in the United States, the only real difference is kind of the rural city divide. I would say that's the biggest difference in the United States, and in terms of right and left, and different sensibilities. But
I'm not proposing like a north versus south kind of thing, or east versus west, or the coast versus the center. I'm suggesting a Syrian, as you say, the cities versus the
a bunch of angry terrorists and shit
militias,
just descends.
loads and loads of militias, all fighting for different causes, changing allegiances. You have a alarmingly radical Christian right. You have a highly militant far right. You have an increasingly militant far left. And as I said, a couple of one large recession.
And I can imagine the corporations in Silicon Valley arming themselves with drones.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Universities are usually breeding grounds for the militias. And you have a bunch of MIT guys strapping homemade bombs to homemade drones. Yeah, definitely.
Well, this is cheery, guys. I just wanted to bitch about some dickheads on Twitter. What the fuck is this descending into? Haven't even finished my wine yet. Fuck.
I mean, I'm sure it won't come to that. I'm sure we'll fix capitalism. Everything's going to work out fine.
Okay, so here, let me lay out the rosy version of this.
Please do.
Okay, so So this is how we get a successful left, peaceful political project. Run a social democrat or democratic socialist platform, which Bernie Sanders is doing. Let's say he gets elected. He builds a massive grassroots movement to hold the feet to the fire of all the politicians involved, Republican and Democrat. Then he's got to stack the Supreme Court, which may or may not work. He's got to do everything possible to fix democracy so that the right never again gains a foothold in the way they do with gerrymandering and all the other shenanigans they get up to. You got to ban lobbyists. You got to take money out of politics. If Bernie can do even half of these things, that'll severely hurt the right and strengthen the left and progressives. Then we
imagine how hard that would be. How many interests you're going against? Like,
well, that's the thing. That's why
he's just the president of the United States.
That's why the grassroots.
That's not enough power.
That's why the grassroots movement needs. That's really, it comes down to that. And Bernie's the only one who understands that you need to build the grassroots movement.
Right. So the sort of power you have when you have one of these like mums groups protesting against some bullshit, you need to apply that to things that actually matter, right?
And Twitter mobs too. You need to get them fucking on the right thing.
Use them for fucking something
they
useful.
They need to be tweeting their representatives instead of each other, and bitching about random crap. Do things like cancel the debt, actually go after the tax avoiders and the bankers. You get a lot of that money back in, and once you get a lot of that money back in, or even before, if you start implementing universal programs like Medicare for all, pharmacare, childcare, all this crap, these programs, the reason they're so hard to get rid of is because they become extremely popular very quickly. So the ruling class has a very difficult time dismantling once they're already in place.
And it's similar to the NHS, so
yes.
The national healthcare system,
exactly.
right? The Conservatives want to privatize everything and sell it all to their corporate donors, and every time they threaten to touch the NHS, they lose an election. And they've become increasingly clever about it, so that, they're not selling off the NHS, they're helping with some support from the private market, blah, blah,
right.
blah, blah. But it is a tightrope they have to balance
right,
now.
Exactly.
Because they know if they fuck with that and they cross that line, no, like, it'll never happen.
And I mean, there's history of trust busting in the United States. It's happened before under Roosevelt, the first Roosevelt. And it can happen again. Breaking up the monopolies, weakening capital's power overall. And then the other big thing is building international solidarity movements. So already there's been whispers of Corbyn, Varoufakis.
I love him.
Bernie,
I love Varoufakis. It's amazing.
He said, Varoufakis specifically said that they're going to try to do a third or fourth international come January. So basically another left-wing global international movement.
And that's not idealism. Look, the right wing does it. Look at all these institutions. Yes. Look at the G7 summit, right? Like that's exactly how they roll, right?
And the left doesn't have that. And the idea is that now those guys are gonna try to build that moving forward. And if you have that, then you can actually, if you get the UK, United States, I don't know, maybe a few other countries going, social democrat or farther enough left, you can make a pretty big dent in the world because the US and these countries are really leaning on stepping on the throats of a lot of other smaller countries right now and preventing them from going left. So this would free up a lot of other movements around the world. And then what you can do is, I think Corbyn's, finance minister or whoever it is, was talking about incentivizing co-ops and changing the rules so that like workers could actually take over businesses that were failing or were trying to move. So you would actually start building a two-tier system where more and more companies and businesses were cooperative and socialist, and that the idea is that eventually people would see that these are the better places to work in, and that they would become more popular and people would go there. And as you do all this, you're creating and promoting parallel systems so that eventually the state can slowly wither away.
I just want to start clapping. That's beautiful. Is it realistic though?
Well, that was a little bit more optimistic.
Will anyone allow this?
I mean, it's not that mental.
No, I know.
Stranger things have happened, and the funny thing is, we're talking about how the left hamstring themselves and criticise themselves, but the right have tied themselves up in their own philosophical knot. And what that is austerity.
Yes.
So because the right have said austerity, 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 we have to balance the books, the left are actually often very good at these big mobilisation projects for changing things. And once the world starts shaking, once the economy starts hurting, the right being like, oh, everyone should get taxed higher and give more money to the banks. There's only so much people are prepared to give. Right now, we're living in an age where almost no one under 30 even thinks of buying a house. So there's no property to confiscate. Right? Like, there's no further they can be pushed. And so we couldn't have a second age of austerity. Next time the banks ask for a bailout, that's going to happen. And when the left say, no, we're not going to bail out the banks, instead we're going to invest money in some of the programs you just described, the right don't really have a counter to that, right? Other than the recession that they just caused. And this is what happened with the last recession. It got blamed on Bill Clinton, Tony Blair. It got blamed on the centre left, right? And so the Conservatives have had a resurgence. Different in Britain to America, where you had Obama, but still, you get my point. But now, when a massive recession happens again under the Conservatives' watch, I don't think the world's really gonna listen to, oh yeah, let's have 4 more years of austerity. Brilliant. Like, we need answers and we need hope. And all the Conservatives have, this is why, even though my dad leans Conservative at times, he says there's nothing worse. He thinks of everything in business terms, right? And there's nothing worse than a manager that's just like, let's just cut costs, let's just fire people and save money. It's like, there's no inspiration there. There's no ideals there. There's no way to move forwards or improve.
That's all the
things.
Conservatives are.
And the right doesn't offer. Yeah, they offer no vision, no hope, no promise.
Well, having been in a part of the business that's failed and gone bankrupt, when you start firing staff, when you start cutting costs, that's a death spiral. That's all.
And
all you're
everyone's going to
doing
be
is
happy and motivated.
there's no point of like, oh yes, we fired enough people that this company is now going to shoot to the stars. Well, as soon as you start, buying in shitty quality products, as soon as you fire the people who know what they're doing, that means that you are in a death spiral, and that's what the Tory's been doing. And hopefully Corbyn can fix it if given a chance.
I have a question about British politics.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Nice.
Where do the far right park their votes? Like the alt right, the fascists, the racists. Where do they park their votes in Britain?
So you get splintered between UKIP, Brexit Party, and all that, and then they end up strategically voting.
Do people actually still vote for BNP? Or
who knows? There's so many of these little splinter groups.
well, I mean, isn't that kind of a good thing for the left? That all.
No, because the right in the end up strategically voting Conservatives because better dead than red.
Jesus. Jesus.
I was going to say, like, another hopeful thing, actually, is that the far right is pretty much as splintered as the far left. They are just as prone to infighting. They're just as prone to just collapsing in on themselves.
And it is easy to criticise the left, but look at, like, Brexit could be a case study in the right fucking itself over through infighting and politics, right?
It's true. I mean, if Corbyn somehow comes out on top, like that would be the story right there.
Yeah.
Well, also because Corbyn's offering something instead of nothing.
I can dream, I can hope. But I tell you what, like, and this is true actually. Roger, who is a long-time troll of the show, told me that you can't reach across the aisle, you can't persuade the centre. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is just get young people to vote. That's it. Just make this appealing and interesting to them. And to bring it back to how we started this discussion, I don't think pissing matches on Twitter is going to do it. You need to offer something to be for, not something to be against, right? Like, you know those guys where your first year of college where you're like, you go to a concert and everyone tells you like, oh, I like these guys before their second album, and they tell you what music they don't like, and you're like, oh my God, I need to leave this room so hard.
Yeah.
And that's what leftist politics feels like. Everyone can tell you what they're against. Like, well, of course, I'm against Trump. Boo-hoo, I'll give you a fucking medal.
Yeah.
Like, what are you for, right? And that's why I got excited when he started saying, like, what is actually possible? How do we move out?
That's
of
the
it? Everyone
exciting
knows
thing
it's
about
shit,
the left.
right?
The left offers possibilities. The right offers more of the same, more austerity, more neoliberalism.
I mean, what are the right pushing for? A campaign of, like, make girls less slutty? Who the fuck wants that? I love slutty girls.
It's
Jesus.
because you have no moral character, that's why.
Yeah, unless you go far enough right, then they offer their own kind of weird utopia, white ethno-states and such.
Which is why generally they should be stopped.
No, like, this is part of the problem. I think we spend too much time worrying about them. The far right are not going to gain mass appeal.
Hitler only had, what,
there is
35% of the vote when he took over?
Okay, but I don't think the solution to that is combating the far right and their nonsense. This is what I think the point I said before about dog whistles. Like, you can be so concerned with what the fringe are doing that you ignore the middle. And I don't think the far left arguing with the far right are going to persuade anyone in the middle. It's
But
just
the
a
middle,
nonsense
as we talked
conversation,
about, I
right?
think will always, the liberals, the centrists, in the end, if they will always side with the fascists when things get nasty.
I think they'll side with an option, not with a debate and a paralysed confusion. And I think the far right are very good at being clear and pragmatic and ignoring their differences.
Yeah, you're probably
right, because this is what they do: is they just club together and they don't actually care, right? If they disagree on this issue or that issue or that issue, they welcome Brendan O'Neill, who self-describes as a communist. They welcome Dave Rubin, who's a homosexual. Like, they don't mind,
right,
as long as it's progressing their goals. And the left, they're not so
right.
pragmatic.
The left definitely does need to be more pragmatic. We need to open up space to allow those normies, those centrists, to drift leftward, and to feel welcome. Because we don't make them feel welcome. We make them feel like they're stupid and they're not woke enough and they're racist and they're homophobic.
And I think that coming up the young age of South Park Twitch streamers who sometimes get political. It'd be brilliant if, we just build a left that's welcoming and cool for them to join. And that's not what I'm seeing at the moment often, which is why we invited you on, because I hope you're part of that movement, Swell. Like, the world fucking needs it.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Damn straight. Thank you.
Is that the perfect point to end on then, gents?
Yeah, it might be.
Friend, love and acceptance, and try to be a bit more inclusive with people who can join the movement.
Don't jump down people's throats because they said something slightly problematic and scare them off. Just lead by example and educate them. Send them videos. Send them this. Give them readings. Bring them to meetings. They'll eventually get there on their own. Theory Plebe and I have been talking about the Sanders to ContraPoints to Marx pipeline. And once you get somebody in on Bernie, start loading them up on ContraPoints, they'll get into the rest of BreadTube, learning some theory, getting some laughs along the way, and then they'll start hearing more about anarchism or Marx or socialism. And next thing you know, we have another comrade.
And the revolution shall be glorious.
Like, just on a point of propaganda, I don't think anti-capitalist is the way to voice your message. And I think even Bernie does this well. He's not anti-capitalist, he's anti-corporatist. Like, I love his line where he's like, we do have socialism in America, just for the corporations.
That's a great line.
Fucking line. And it's very, you just described the history of capitalism was the default state of mankind. It's very hard hill to climb to be against that.
Right.
But when you're against like what we currently have, which is like unsustainable corporate greed on life support that working class people have to fund, like that is very easy for everyone to get behind.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about a bread line, that's the opening line. Not I'm anti-capitalist, I'm fucking anti giving a billionaire a handout.
Yeah.
That's the gateway drug that I think you need to hook the kids on.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, you're right. That's the pipeline.
Just the gateway drug is Bernie.
Well, okay, yeah. After this, I implore you guys to look up that Rising Up Bernie Sanders video.
Promote your
like 5 minutes
Patreon.
long.
It'd be an honor.
Oh yeah, so my YouTube channel, I guess I didn't. I am the Swoletariat. My Patreon is _Swoletariat. Patreon. Yeah, I've got like 4 tiers. Please help me out. Everything does help. I would love to. I would love to do this full time instead of being a working man.
I think you should, and I would recommend all our listeners to do that. And I will do it myself. Put my money where my mouth is, because I think the world needs more of this and less of the fucking rest of the nonsense. I think. So.
Yeah.
And can we also find you on Twitter?
Yes.
Please don't. Please just everyone just delete their Twitter accounts now. That's my call to action. Delete your Twitter account. Support them on Patreon.
Yeah. You know what? I'll
Check
just
out
if you really want to find my Twitter, it's links on my YouTube. Otherwise,
I might join Twitter just because of it.
God help us.
You're encouraging me.
You're incorrigible. Stephen, thank you so much. That was awesome.
All right.
Thank
That
you very
got
much.
more serious than I was planning. We got pretty into the Marxist doctrine. I liked it.
Good. There's more of where that came from.
Yeah, no. Yeah, give me a week to edit it, and then yeah. Hopefully,
Okay, I'll send you.
hopefully you like the edit.
Yeah, great. I'll probably end up. Give me the edit, and I'll probably put it up on YouTube as well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Is there anyone you would recommend we speak to?
Oh, good. That's a good question. Theory Plebe, I think would be great.
Theory Plebe, yeah.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. He's less Marxist, more. Well, he's a critical theorist, which is gonna be kind of Marxist, but it's more philosophy based. And he's got his channel just got deleted by YouTube. So he has a lot to say about YouTube and social media.
Okay.
But he straddles a really good line between, I guess you would say, social justice warriors and approachalists. But he's much more on the philosophy side, and I think he has different ways of approaching how to create improvement video on
Alright, I look forward to your next internet-based drama. I have a feeling you're going to get involved.
yeah, probably, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll be there lurking. But
Great.
no, cheers for that, man. That was really fun. Long time coming, but that'll be fun.
I think that's pretty much how I described you first time. First time to me, I'm like, oh yeah. He seems like a bit of a brochure.
We didn't even get to talk about Swedish socialism. Sorry, Jeremy. Next time.
Yeah, actually,
No.
I was going to say that
Yep.
actually, like there's this perception about like the Planet Bros, it's like toxic.
Yeah. Wait, after what? British election?
All of them. Oh, fuck it, man. Let's have a celebration.
All right, sounds good. I'm gonna look them up and see whether you want to talk to them or not.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if you personally know him, if you could introduce us, that would be very helpful.
Yes, I will. Okay, awesome.
All right, cheers, fella. Have a good weekend.
Okay. All right, bye now. Yep.
It's been like a genuine pleasure. You're incredibly well read. Yes. Yeah, that's right. There's not much to say. It used to be good, and then neoliberalism happened. Oh yeah, after elections. After Labour seeps into power, after Bernie just turns the entire US red, but that doesn't work.